Hello friends, my name is Zach. I am a nature guide here at the Johnson Nature Center.
Hi third graders, it's Cass at the Johnson Nature Center in Bloomfield Hills.
We are just wrapping up our maple sugaring season here.
When you were part of the virtual program, when you tasted the sap and the syrup and made observations, and when you got to see a video recording of Will inside the sugar shack.
And to close off, we have a couple of great questions that were submitted that we thought that we would share with you guys.
Here are the questions.
What happens to maple trees if it gets too cold in the winter? 50% of a tree's weight is just based on water alone. And because of that, it's really important for the tree to stay alive because that water is at risk of freezing. To prevent that, there's a couple of ways for a tree to not get frozen. One of those ways is that it has the ability to move its water away from the wood that it doesn't want to get frozen and damaged to parts that it's okay to be frozen or damaged. So the bark, for example, is a great barrier that the tree doesn't mind getting frozen in the winter. Another thing that trees do, like maple trees, is that they can turn the starches in the tree into sugar. And when the sugar mixes with the water, it actually takes longer for it to freeze and freezes at colder temperatures compared to when normal water, without anything mixed in it, freezes itself.
How can you tell how old a maple tree is? Really great question. Since we're not going to be cutting down these trees to count the number of rings, there's an easy math problem that you can do in order to estimate the tree's age. Remember how we took that caliper and we measured the diameter or the width of the tree? You take the diameter of the tree and you get a calculation that's specific for each tree species. So in our case, with the sugar maple trees, that number is 5.5. So if I have a tree that's 10 centimeters in diameter, I multiply that number by 5.5. So again, 10 is the diameter of the tree. I multiply it by 5.5 for sugar maples, and I will get the estimated age. So what's that, friends? I hope you got 55. The correct answer is 55 years old.
What happens to the sap when the weather gets warm in the summer? A tree's main way of getting food and energy is through a process called photosynthesis. So during photosynthesis, the sun provides energy, and then a tree also takes in a gas called carbon dioxide, and will go through a process where in the end it creates sugar and it also releases oxygen as well. However, when it's winter, all of the leaves are gone and the tree goes into a dormant state. So it doesn't really depend, or it has to go through photosynthesis. So what the tree ends up doing is that it produces sap by taking water up into the roots and mixing it with the sugars that were already produced in the summer, and that's how the tree gets its energy. When it's springtime, or it gets closer to spring, that sap will go up into the buds and cause the buds to swell and make leaves, and then once the leaves come back, it's ready to do photosynthesis again. So it doesn't need to rely on the sap.
Can I grow my own maple tree? Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question, friends. Of course you can. With the permission of adults, you can go into your yard and you can get a sapling, which is a young maple tree, and plant it. Remember, that tree has to be 10 centimeters in diameter for you to tap it, but that's not the only thing trees are useful for. They provide shade, shelter, and food, and water for other animals. Yes, it's a really great experiment to even measure the tree over time.
How long does it take for a bucket to get full of sap? It really depends on the tree and the weather when we are collecting sap. Our buckets here hold about 3 gallons of sap, or 11 liters. So if it's a really nice day and it's a really big and healthy tree, it can easily fill that bucket in a single day. If the trees are smaller, or if there are a series of colder days, it might take longer for the sap to drip out and fill the bucket. On a really good day, it's possible for a tree to release about 3 to 4 drips per second.
How does the sap flow right to the bucket? This question, friends, we've gotten a lot from you all. Turns out researchers have been figuring this out since the 1800s. It's a very interesting process of the states of matter, which is solid, liquids, and gases, and has to do with the air temperature. So, as a tree warms, there are ice crystals that start to melt, and that produces gas bubbles inside the tree, and it expands. And when that gas expands, it pushes the sap up the tree. Now, in contrast to when the sap thaws, it then goes back down the tree. So it's this up and down process of changes in pressure because of the states of matter for solids, liquids, and gases. So when the temperature drops below freezing, so we're going down in temperature, the tree must respond to protect itself from damage, so the pressure drops, the ice forms, and the frozen sap kind of stays put and goes back down a little bit. So that's how sap flows inside the tree and eventually gets to the bucket.
How much sap can one maple tree produce? Most maple trees should be able to produce between 20 or 60 liters of sap, and that's going to be between 5 and 15 gallons to be used for our maple sugaring process. So with so many trees that we have here to tap, that's going to be a lot of sap that we can make for syrup for you guys.
Last question. We had so many questions and we just chose 8 of them. Are there other uses for sap from other tree species besides the sugar maple? Great question. And yes, since all trees produce sap, we have been learning about tree sap from different species of trees. The Bloomfield Hills High School students who come out here for their science elective are looking at birch trees, researching them, tapping them, and seeing what nutrients is inside the sap of those trees. Now, different trees have sap with different benefits. One of these things that looks like sap, but actually is different, is something called resin. And it's that sticky stuff that you see on the outside. That resin helps protect the bark. If a branch falls off, we're trying to make sure that insects don't get into the outer bark and into the living part of the tree. Another thing is wooden baskets and boats can be coated with resin to prevent it from getting oversaturated with water and leaking. So sap has different nutrients. Maybe check out some interesting recipes that can be with sap. And then there's a contrast to sap, which is resin.